I think the big problem with any kind of human government, any political system, is that we we rely on just arbitrary rules, and we rely on excuses to govern, like to one degree or another. We make up reasons why the people in power should be in power, and we make up excuses for why the people who aren't in power, and we try to like make them comfortable with it. Like the people in charge try to justify their rule, and they try to make make the people lower down on the ladder, the power lower in the hierarchy. They try to make them feel like they are like it's justified, like and the problem is, I think they don't, they're, to one degree or another, whether it's whether it's just tyranny, or whether it's monarchy, or whether it's democracy, whether it's republicanism, or whatever, whatever system of government, or communism, or whatever you're operating under. It's all built on excuses. It's all built on lies to one degree or another. It's all like well, I don't know, monarchy. Okay, well, the monarch is in charge because he or she, has the mandate of heaven, and just that it's kind of justified, like, well, this guy's in charge, and God has not removed him yet, and so obviously he's supposed to be in charge, and then like on the other end, like democracy, it's like, oh well, it's the will of the people that this guy's in charge, and I guess that's a little, it's kind of similar though, isn't it? It's like, okay, but then why does that justify this person being in charge? Like why is the will of the people supreme? And I'm not like, I think democracy, Republican form of government, where we elect people to represent us based on voting, based on democracy. I think that is probably the best setup we have so far, as human beings. I think that's insofar as like we have to choose a system, and no system is going to be perfect. I would go with democracy overall. It's like it's the least of all evils most of the time. It's obviously riven with flaws, and it's far from perfect, but I think it's better than the alternative. It's better than the alternatives. That's what I would prefer to live under, unless we have something better. And I think I have a better idea personally. I think what we need to do is just form a system of government, or I guess it's a whole societal system, but where it's just based around like natural law. I think and by that I don't mean like rule of the strongest or anything. I mean but I mean like we need to put people in positions of like authority and influence and expertise and whatever, people who just demonstrate by virtue of their nature and their talents that they should be in those positions, like really naturally kind of militant, disciplined people should be placed in the military, and then like people who are kind of compassionate and temperate and sober and very reasonable, I think, should be in positions of leadership. And then and so on and so forth. People of great raw intellectual strength and great analytical ability should be in academic positions and things like that. And I realize that sounds like simple. I'm not saying it would be like extremely simple. It would be complicated to figure this out, but at the same time, I think basing society around natural law, it's like, okay, what, we're human beings, we're going to function in a society, right? Like most people want that. I mean, like I am I'm kind of a solitary person, to one degree or another. Like I enjoy the company of other people. I also really enjoy, some time to myself when I have the opportunity, and I think that's healthy. That's kind of my disposition. But at the same time, at the end of the day, like unless someone is just like a flat out hermit or something, you know, like living completely alone, like I don't know, like he's an anchorite or whatever, and he like walls himself up in a, up in a wall. He walls himself up in a cell, and he's like, he's, I guess even then he would be, he'd be interacting with people because they'd have to like slip him food through the little hole, or food and water and stuff. But anyway, my point is that human beings, we need a society. We basically all need like some kind of society to function. We're social animals. We need some kind of society to function. Even if we're not like the most sociable, gregarious people, just in general, we still need you still need other people, right? Like the whole like no man is an island cliche, and that kind of thing. People obviously have varying degrees of independence and interdependence, and like different kinds of people need different amounts of social interaction and that kind of thing. But everyone needs somebody. I think to one degree or another, if we're going to be healthy, everybody needs somebody. We all need to be part of some kind of human community in some way. So given that, why don't we wouldn't it be best if we could organize ourselves based on the principle of, whosoever is best suited for a role, a task, a purpose in that society, let's place him or her in that role. Let that role be his or hers. And let he or she perform that role and carry out that function. Because I think we'll get the best results that way. And so that's my personal. Obviously, there's a lot to be ironed out, and I'm realistic. I don't think this is necessarily going to happen in my lifetime or anything. I'd like humanity to adopt this system of society and government, which is like sort of like, I like to think of it as kind of like an enlightened caste-based society, which not like in the traditional sense. This is just more of like, look, this is what you're good at. This is where your natural talents lie. This is what you want to do. Let's just have you do that, and then we'll figure it out from there. I think we'll get the best results that way. Like, it's not based on, nepotism or wealth, or, it's not based on like any superficial characteristics. It's not based on race. It's not based on sex. It's not based on, religion or anything like that. It's just, look, are you good at this? Are you naturally suited to do this thing? And do you want to do this thing? And, yeah, that's pretty much it, and then we'll just figure it out. We'll place people where they should be, and where they want to be. Because that's, it's got to be a voluntary thing. Obviously, like, if people don't want to be placed into some kind of specific role, well, then they don't have to be. They can just be, part of like they can just be kind of a generalist. Like, that's fine too. Totally fine to just be a generalist. I mean, often having a generalist attitude is, being a jack of all trades is actually a very good and admirable thing. That's what, we absolutely need people like that. Like, absolutely need people with a broad spectrum of abilities and interests and talents. That's very important too. Yeah. So, so my point is, we need to stick with democracy, I think, for the time being, until we can implement this better system. I think that's kind of my thinking about the future. That's what I'd like to work towards in my lifetime. I'd like to try to encourage people to take up this new sort of vision for the future, insofar as I can. And if it doesn't work, it was worth a try. I think it's worth a try. I think I will die on my deathbed well satisfied if I can at least say I tried. I tried to come up with something better, and I tried to implement it. Whether or not people go for it or not, that's okay. Hopefully they do, but I'm not gonna lose sleep over whether they do or not. But we need to stick with democracy for now because it's the least evil system of government. People like to badmouth democracy when they don't get what they want, but I think it's better than the alternatives. Yeah. So that's I think democracy should be limited to kind of more local matters, more like, okay, how does this community want to organize itself? Like, what are the noise ordinances? Should dogs be allowed to poop in public parks, or like what that kind of stuff? I think democracy ultimately, in my perfect system, will be useful for things like that. But anything beyond that, like on a national scale, is better served by people who are well suited to making that kind of decision being responsible for that kind of decision.